To start creating our front end and to actually see a page when we hit the main URL of our application, we're going to use something called Templ, an HTML template engine for Go, and we will use this to automatically render pages from the backend whenever somebody hit the URL. This error message is coming from Pocketbase because we didn't yet modify the echo router of Pocketbase to render our page, and we're going to do that right now. So to start doing that, we go ahead into our views folder. We open the layouts directory, and inside that we open the base layout.templ. A Templ file is similar to a Go file but has Templ keyword to create Templ components, meaning that you're going to have HTML text inside of your Go files. So we start by defining our package, which is the package layouts in this case. We're going to create our component using the Templ keyword. This base component would be called the base layout to create a basic HTML page. But now we're going to see these errors. And those errors are coming because we haven't yet installed Templ. To do that, we're going to use Go to install this package. So we're going to run the command go get github.com/ah/Templ. After we installed Templ, go back to our layouts folder into the basic layout, we see that the error has gone. But to actually render this web page inside the browser, we need to modify the application router, meaning we need to modify the router that is used by Pocketbase to render our web page. First, we're going to create a handler that will handle rendering our Templ components with echo router. And to do that, we go into the internal folder to the handler directory, and inside handler.go, we're going to start creating our function to handle the rendering. So create a function, we call it render. This function would take echo context and will take a status code, and then it would take a Templ component that we're going to render. We could name the echo context as C, and this coming from echo.context. And then we need integer or a status code. We can call it status and it will be an integer. Then we can create a variable, maybe an argument called t. And this t is coming from Templ.component. So as a Templ component. This would return an error, as all the function in echo router returns an error. First thing we're going to do here is set the response header. Then we're going to set the response header type. Then we're going to render our Templ component. To set the response header, we're going to get the response from the context. So c.response. We get the writer first, and then we use the write header method. We give it the status code. After our header is created, we're going to set the type of the render by also going to response header. We're going to set up a value of the echo header content type to be equal to the echo HTML meme type. And lastly, we're going to render our component. So we're going to return t.render, and this function from Templ will take a context and an IO writer. So the context would be the request context. So we're going to go ahead and get the request and get its context, and the writer would be the response writer. So c.response.writer. After we created our render method, we're going to go ahead and modify the main.go file to render our web page. Here we're going to use a hook provided by Pocketbase to modify our echo router, or the router behind Pocketbase, to render our web page. And to do that, we're going to use app.onBeforeServe. We're going to add a function to that. This function will take the core.serve event and returns an error. So at the end of this function, we will return null. And then here we could call e.router, but we can see now the core isn't installed from Pocketbase. Isn't imported, sorry. So we're going to import the core from Pocketbase. And after that, we can access the e.router, and we're going to modify or add a rule for getting our homepage. So when a get request is sent to the index of /, which is the main index, we're going to return a function, and this function would return the handler.render function. So handler.render, and then we give it the context, we give it the status OK from HTTP, so http.status OK, which meaning the status code of OK, which is 200. And then lastly, we give it the component that we're going to render whenever a request is set to this route. And the component would come from our layouts and base layout. Now echo is not imported, so make sure to import that. And now we hit save. After that is done, now we could go back to our layout, add something to make sure that it's working. So for example, an h1 tag with hello. We save that and send a request to this URL. We can see our hello. This means successfully updated our echo router to render our web page. Next, we're going to set up the Tailwind and Alpine.js and render this site with Tailwind CSS.